You already know her name, and you know it as an insult. For 3,000 years, to call a woman a Jezebel has meant one thing: a painted, scheming seductress, a shameless woman who uses her body to get her way. The word has ended up in songs, in sermons, in slurs, always pointing at the same picture. And almost none of it is true. The real woman behind that name was not a prostitute. She was not, in the way we imagine it, a seductress at all. She was something the old picture completely misses, and something far more dangerous. She was a queen, a true believer, and quite possibly the most powerful and effective person in her entire kingdom. By the time you understand what she actually did and why we were handed the cartoon instead, you are going to see that we turned one of the most formidable figures in the Bible into a cheap word, precisely so that we would never have to take her seriously. So let us start with the picture in your head, because you did not invent it. For centuries, she has been painted as the ultimate temptress, the woman at the window, done up in her makeup, luring men to their ruin. Somewhere along the way, harlot got attached to her name and never came off, and a whole idea of what a bad woman looks like got built on top of her. And it all seems to hang on two little details in the text: that once, near the end, she painted her eyes, and that a man once threw the word harlotry at her. That is the entire foundation of the legend. 2 lines, and when you go back and actually read what is around those 2 lines, the seductress simply is not there. What is there instead is a woman running a country. Her name was Jezebel, and she was born a princess. Her father was Baal, the king of the Sidonians, up the coast in the great trading cities of Phoenicia. Look at that father's name for a second. Baal. It means, literally, with Baal. She was raised in a royal house at the beating heart of the worship of Baal, the storm god, and his consort. This was not some woman from the margins. This was a daughter of the most sophisticated, wealthy, cosmopolitan culture in the region, and she was given in a political marriage to Ahab, the king of Israel, to seal an alliance between 2 crowns. She did not sneak into power through a bedroom. She was born to it, and she married more of it. And she arrived in Israel carrying her gods with her, and absolutely no intention of leaving them at the border. And here is the first thing that should reset the whole picture. Jezebel was devout. Genuinely, ferociously devout. She did not dabble in Baal. She imported him wholesale and set out to make him the god of the nation she had married into. She put 450 prophets of Baal and 400 more of his consort on the royal payroll, feeding them at her own table. Think about that. 850 state-sponsored clergy, funded by the Queen, to convert a country. And she did not just promote her god. She went hunting for the competition. When she could, she had the prophets of the God of Israel killed, so many that a palace official had to smuggle 100 of them into caves and feed them in secret just to keep them alive. This is not the behavior of a bored seductress. This is a woman on a mission, with the resources of a throne behind her, trying to reprogram an entire nation's soul by force. And notice who is actually running things, because when you read her story again and again, the king wants something and stalls, and it is Jezebel who acts. Ahab has the title. Jezebel has the will, and in that kingdom, the will is what ruled, and she very nearly won. By the time it was over, a prophet of the true God would stand on a hilltop and cry out that he was the only one left, that every other voice for the God of Israel had been hunted into silence or into the grave. Let that land. One woman, carried in from a foreign throne, had come within a breath of erasing a nation's God entirely. In the coldest sense, she was more faithful to her Baal than Israel had ever managed to be to the God who brought them up out of Egypt. That is not the record of a seductress. That is a campaign, run to the edge of total victory. If you want to see exactly what she was, forget the window and the makeup and watch what she does over a vegetable garden. Next to the palace, there was a vineyard, and it belonged to a man named Naboth. Ahab wanted it, offered to buy it, and Naboth said no. It was his family's ancestral land, and by the law of his people, it was not his to sell. And here the king of Israel, this grown man with an army, goes home, lies down on his bed, turns his face to the wall, and refuses to eat. He sulks, and Jezebel walks in, finds her husband pouting like a child over a piece of land, and says the line that tells you everything. Are you not the king? Let me handle it. And then, with terrifying calm, she does. She writes letters in Ahab's name. She seals them with the royal seal. She arranges a public feast, seats Naboth in a place of honor, and pays 2 men to stand up and swear falsely that he had cursed God and the king. And on the strength of that lie, an innocent man is dragged out and stoned to death, and the vineyard falls quietly into the crown's hands. Sit with how that was done. She did not seduce anyone. She used the law. She used religion, a charge of blasphemy, as the murder weapon. She turned the machinery of a just society against a just man flawlessly without ever raising her voice. And notice this, she did not even need to be in the room. She did it by letter, from a distance, with the king's own seal pressing her orders into the wax. A man died judicially, respectably, with witnesses and a verdict and a crowd, and the queen, who engineered every second of it, never had to look at his face. That is what real power actually looks like, not a dagger in the dark, a signature on a document. That is the real Jezebel, not lust, cold, brilliant, righteous-sounding ruthlessness. So now, finally, we can deal with that word, the one that built the whole legend. Years later, when judgment finally comes for her house, a commander named Jehu throws it at her, sneering about the harlotries of Jezebel. And there it is, we think. Proof. She was a whore. But that is not what the word means, and anyone reading it in its own world knew that instantly. All through the Hebrew prophets, there is one image used over and over for a very specific sin: idolatry, chasing after other gods. And the image they use for it is not theft or rebellion. It is adultery, unfaithfulness, harlotry. To worship another god was to cheat on the God who had married himself to that nation. So when Jehu spits the word harlotry at Jezebel, he is not talking about her body at all. He is talking about Baal. Her whoredom was worship. And the instant you see that, the whole thing turns inside out. Her great sin was never that she was loose. It was the opposite. It was that she was faithful, completely, unbreakably faithful, with everything she had, everything she owned, and every life that got in her way, just faithful to the wrong God. We took the scariest thing about her, a total ruthless devotion, and we shrank it down into something we could snigger at. And that is the tell. That is why the cartoon was so convenient. Because a seductress is easy. A seductress you can dismiss with a smirk and move on, and never have to ask a single hard question about yourself. But that is not what nearly destroyed the faith of a whole nation. What nearly destroyed it was a woman of the highest intelligence, the deepest conviction, and the strongest will in the kingdom, who was absolutely certain she was right. That is the actually dangerous person in any age, not the obvious sinner. The true believer with no breaks, the ones so sure their cause is good that the lies, the show trials, the bodies, all of it becomes justified, wholly even, a price worth paying. Jezebel is terrifying, not because she was wicked in some seedy, obvious way, but because in her own mind she was almost certainly the hero, the reformer, the strong one, cleaning up a backward little country, and she was willing to do absolutely anything in service of what she was sure was right. Even the very last scene, the one that started the whole seductress legend, we get backwards. Jehu is coming to kill her, and she knows it. There is no escape. And what does she do? She paints her eyes, and she arranges her hair, and she goes and stands at the high window to meet him. And for 3,000 years we have read that as one final desperate attempt to seduce her killer. But look at the moment. She is a queen, and death is riding through the gate, and she chooses to face it, done up in the full dignity of her office, and the first thing out of her mouth is not a soft word. It is a razor. She calls the conquering general a murderer to his face and dares him. That is not a seductress fluttering her lashes. That is a monarch refusing, to the last second of her life, to die as anything less than a queen. Even her end, we shrank into vanity, because it was easier than admitting how formidable she was, right up to the moment they threw her from the window. So here is why the real Jezebel, not the slur, still matters. The lesson everyone drew from the cartoon was a cheap one. Do not be a scandalous woman. But the real warning in her story is aimed at the most respectable, driven, principled people alive, and it is far more unsettling. It is this: conviction is not the same thing as being right. You can be the smartest, most committed, most certain person in the room, absolutely sure your cause is just, and use that very certainty to justify things that are monstrous. Jezebel did not think she was a villain. Almost no one ever does. She thought she was strong and faithful and necessary. And somewhere in your own life, there will be a moment when you are certain you are right, and the certainty starts whispering that the ends are important enough to bend the rules just this once for a good cause. That whisper is the most dangerous voice you will ever hear, because it does not sound like temptation. It sounds like conviction. Jezebel is what happens when devotion never learns to doubt itself. Jezebel, not a harlot, a queen, a believer, and one of the most powerful people in the ancient world, buried under a word we use to avoid her. Go and read it for yourself tonight, in the Book of Kings, and watch how little of the legend is actually on the page. And here is the thing about a force like Jezebel. It takes an equal and opposite force to stand against it. In all of Israel, there was exactly one man willing to walk out and face her and her 850 prophets alone on a mountain in front of the whole nation. Next time, we will meet him. Stay with me, and we will pull another one out of the dark.